Starting today, we're going to do 3 weeks of study on what I've termed radical hospitality. That's actually the name of a book that I read several years ago and pulled some of this material from. And the first step of this discussion together is the step where we talk about the word love. Love. It's a giant, often misunderstood concept, isn't it? I Googled the word love the other day and got 13 million hits. The Beatles sang about it, didn't they? They said, love is all we need. And if my study is correct, every one of the Bible's 66 books has the word love in it. Somewhere. Sometimes many times. And then we think about how we use the word love. We will say, some folks in here, I love to camp, right? How many of you are campers? You love to camp. Bless your hearts. My idea of roughing it is a Holiday Inn. Yeah, I'm with you, sister.
Motel 6.
Yeah, so we go, I love to camp. But then we say, I love my dog. And I do love my dog. I have a Labrador Retriever. I love my dog. But when I get home today, I will kiss my wife and say, I love you. Now, does that mean I love her the way I love my dog? I hope not. Does that mean that you love to camp the same way you love your dog? It's a confusing word. It has so many different implications. Think of all the songs that have been written through the years about love. Just song after song after song. And perhaps the most confusing thing about love is this. We talk about doctrine in the church. We talked about it this morning in D group. We talk about distinctions of our denomination. We talk about church protocols a lot. How we do things. What's called ecclesiology. How we do all that. And we even talk about faith and hope. I have a friend, every email she sends says, choose hope. It will not disappoint. But Paul clearly said in 1 Corinthians 13 that love trumps all that, doesn't it? Now abides faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is what? Love. So since our study on radical hospitality is written around or works around the concept of love to launch us, I did an experiment a couple weeks ago. I posted on social media a single question, and I'm going to ask them to show it in just a second, the responses. I said this. I said, when church people say, we love everyone, what immediately comes to your mind? So let's set this up before I show you the responses. The responses were primarily from people in our community here in Gaston County in this region. Now there were some people in other parts of the world that I know and whatnot, but primarily I have about 3,000 people followers on Facebook, so they're not all from right here, but by and large they are. By and large the responses were from people right here in Gaston County. So I asked them, what do you think it means when you hear churches say, we love everybody? And remember, these responses are from the very people we say we love. And we want to learn how to be radically, truly hospitable to them. So let's look at the responses and see what you think. They're a little hard to see, but that's okay. I want you to have to strain a little bit. Because some of them I couldn't even use the whole response. It would have been inappropriate. Overwhelmingly, I heard words like, it's fake. It's conditional. They love us if we act like them and think like them. I saw words like dishonest. One person put it's a crock. Cowardice. And behind that, they said it keeps them from talking about real issues. They just claim to love everybody. And what I sensed was an us versus them mentality. Overwhelmingly. broke my heart. I mean, these are startling. How many of you are surprised by those responses? They're startling. Yet, folks, I can tell you, this is why our churches are empty today. People don't believe us when we say we love everyone. They don't believe us when we say we love everyone, yet we marginalize people and we ostracize people. And we turn our religion into nationalism and political instead of Jesus Christ, who said through Paul and the Holy Spirit, the greatest of these is love. One really interesting response, and we can take those down. I know they're a little heartbreaking to watch them. But one interesting response I got was from a lady who said this. She's part of a church, very close to here actually. She said, I can only speak for my church. And we are a friendly church. Big letters. Well, here's the interesting thing about her church. I happen to know her church. Several years ago, I polled that particular friendly church. And of the 15 of the people I polled, they could only name 15 of the approximately 50 people who attend almost every week. Wow. That got my attention. Taught me a lot when we did that with them. When I shared this story with Thane this week, he had a great observation. He said, people don't want a friendly church. They want a church where they can make friends. And we could go on this way, never grapple with the reality that our buildings are empty and that something other than a handshake and a smile is what people want. John Lennon said it. He said, living is easy with your eyes closed, misunderstanding everything you see. We can keep our eyes closed, folks. We cannot admit what's on the screen. But it's a reality. It's a reality. And the very people that we want to show radical hospitality don't trust us. You say, well, that's just a few people. Every study I read seems to validate this. And if love truly is the greatest of all, then how are we going to shift and truly love our neighbors as ourselves, as we read in Mark 12? Let's go all the way back to where this started in the modern era. Let's go back to the Nativity, when Jesus was born. You know the story if you've been around church or Sunday school much in your life. Mary and Joseph found themselves in Bethlehem, having to register for their taxes. And it was imminent that Christ was going to be born. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. I see two things in this short reality of Christ coming to earth that just jump from the page as we try to reach out and truly love people who by their admission don't trust us. I see two things. One, Christ was willing to change. And two, Christ was willing to be highly vulnerable. Think about it. Think about how much changed for Jesus for him to come to earth. Where was he seated? At the right hand of God. Where was he born? In a stable, in a cave, because nobody else would bring them in. Wouldn't bring him in because his mother was pregnant, and everybody thought she was pregnant out of wedlock, because guess what? Mary was a teen mom. A single teen mom. That's another whole story for another day. But people didn't believe her story. That God was responsible for this. What if your daughter came in tomorrow at 14 and said, Mom, Dad, I'm pregnant. Oh no, well who's the father? Well, Jesus, God, I'm going to have the Messiah. Would you believe that? Most people wouldn't. The second thing we see is that Jesus Christ's love showed that he was willing to become radically vulnerable. That's a big word, but we don't like being vulnerable, do we? We don't like the risk that something might not go the way we think it should. It's scary. But think about it. Did Jesus come with royal regalia? No, he didn't. A few weeks ago, we did an event in Charlotte with comedian Michael Jr. Fantastic day. Michael's internationally known, so we had to help put together a security team to bring him in. Let me tell you, Michael is a great guy. I enjoyed getting to know him. Look forward to doing an event with him in October if all goes as planned. But he has expectations. He wants a certain kind of water. He likes Fiji water. He wants a certain kind of beef jerky in his green room. He wants to get in and out so that he can focus on what he's there to do. So we had three police officers who looked like classic Secret Service who accompanied him. Everywhere he went, picked him up at the airport, front door, picked him up, escorted him. Jesus didn't do any of that. He came as the most vulnerable individual he could become, a baby. Nobody's more vulnerable than a baby. A baby depends on others for its life for the first few years of its existence. So the question is, if Christ, who came and Emmanuel with us, is willing to change so dramatically and radically and willing to be vulnerable, what now for us? I mean, we've clearly seen that the people we want to love, that we say we love, feel maligned, they feel manipulated, they don't trust us. So how willing am I to change? How willing am I to say, you know what, I don't like it because it's different, but the stage needs to change? How willing am I to say, you know, I don't understand it, but we do need to make our nursery more accessible to children. Are we willing to do that? And how vulnerable are we willing to be? How out of control are we willing to be? Am I willing, and I'm asking myself this, am I willing to become a listener instead of just a talker who wants to invite somebody to church? We'll talk more about that next week. We shared this briefly in D group, and then we'll move toward close. The high rate of failure for churches who are doing what Southside has entered into doing, where you're trying to rebirth, replant almost. There's a high rate of failure at that. And guess what? It has zero to do the failures with the people in the community. Because the people in your community want to be loved. They want to be accepted. They want to feel worthy. They want the security of relationships. And those can happen within the church. So far, in my experience, without fail, every time a church has tried this, whether I was involved or whether I've read about it in my studies, it's failed because people were unwilling to change and be vulnerable. Several years ago, local church let somebody share their space. It's great. It's going to be great. A couple of weeks in, the people who were sharing it told me, we're getting notes on the mirror in the bathroom that says we didn't turn the light off. People are not willing to be vulnerable. You say, well, they need to turn the light off. How many of your kids grew up turning all the lights off every time they were in your house? Anybody? You know. People are people. But it seems our churches are so resistant to change. Do we worship our tradition? Do we worship the order of our service? Pastor of the church on the west end of town is leaving that church in July. And he told me, he said, I came here and all I did was change one song in the order of service. And you'd have thought I had cursed out the lead deacon. And for 2 years, he's battled it. He finally said, I've had enough. What do we love that we're clinging to that we're not willing to change? And over the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, in a very practical sense, what it means to be doers and not just hearers of the word. We're going to talk with each other during the service. You're going to have that opportunity, because my desire, and I think it's consistent with Christ's desire, because he said that we love our neighbors as ourselves. Several years ago, my friend Deacon John Weisenhorn from St. Michael's Catholic, a dear friend, a mentor in my life, he said, Dwayne, it is time for people to stop doing the work of God. And I said, well, wait a minute, Deacon, what are you talking about? He said, and it's time for them to start doing the will of God. There's a big difference. Look, churches have done the work of God. We've got the programs down. We could install another program in here and stir up some people and have 75 people in here pretty quickly. But guess what? It would just be the same cycle as always. But until churches are willing to die to themselves, as it were, to change and to be vulnerable, nothing will change as to how people know we love them. I could take you this morning on a tour. We could go to 4 churches in each quadrant of this county, north, south, east, and west. 4 churches. Between them, you have 20,000 square feet. Another one has more than that in prime real estate. So between the 4, they probably have 80,000 square feet of space. Guess how many attending active members they would have if I put them all in one room? 4 churches, 80,000 square feet. Fewer than 100. Is that the community's fault? I don't think so. You say, Dwayne, that's discouraging. I hope it's exciting. You got all these people out here, but you have a chance to love. And God's going to teach us to love because Christ lives in us. And we're going to learn to love people so they know they are loved. And we'll be doers and not just hearers about God's love. And that's my prayer for us. Let's stand together and pray and be dismissed.